Life on Earth is, at its heart, completely solar-powered. But how does that even work? How does sunlight become the actual food that keeps almost every living thing on this planet going? Well, today we're going to dive deep into photosynthesis, and we're not just talking about a boring chemical equation, we're talking about the incredible story of how our world eats.
So let's start with a question that's kind of mind-blowing when you really stop and think about it. You look at a massive tree, right? I mean, just this huge thing with all its wood, its leaves, its branches. Where does all that stuff actually come from? Your first thought might be, oh, it comes from the soil. But that's not really it. The wild answer is that it's built almost entirely out of thin air and light. Seriously. And that amazing trick is called photosynthesis. At its core, it's just this incredibly elegant conversion process. It's the planet's greatest magic act. Taking the energy of a sunbeam that's traveled, 150 million kilometers and locking it away into stable chemical bonds that we can all use as food.
Now, to really get a handle on just how big a deal this process is, you have to understand how it divides the entire living world into two basic teams. You've got the ones who make their own food, and then you've got everyone else who has to get it from somewhere.
Okay, so on Team 1, we have the autotrophs. You can just think of them as the self-feeders. These are our planet's producers. They're the ultimate creators, building their own food from super simple ingredients, like CO2 from the air. And then there's Team 2, the heterotrophs, or the other feeders. And yep, that's us. We're the consumers. We can't just make our own food, so we have to eat producers, or we eat other consumers who eat producers. It all comes back to them.
And this really shows that relationship perfectly. Every single consumer, like this little chipmunk here, is completely dependent on the producers. And it's not just for the food it eats. It's also for the very oxygen it breathes, which is just a waste product of photosynthesis that, well, we can't live without.
So how in the world did the producers pull this off? Where does this incredible chemical manufacturing actually happen? Well, let's zoom in. We're going to take a journey deep inside the green machine, the solar-powered factory of the plant. Our trip starts right here, with the leaf. You can think of it as the plant's solar panel. It's perfectly designed, perfectly angled, all to capture as much sunlight as it possibly can. But the really amazing engineering, that's happening on the inside. So, if we were to slice that leaf open, we'd find this layer called the mesophyll. This is basically the main factory floor, and it is just jam-packed with these specialized cells that do all the heavy lifting. Now let's zoom in even more on just one of those cells. If you could peek inside, you'd find about 30 or 40 of these little green dots. And they're not just specks of color. These are the actual engines of photosynthesis. They're called chloroplasts. And finally, here we are, the chloroplast. This tiny organelle, just a few micrometers across, is where it all happens. This is where simple water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight are transformed into sugar and oxygen. This is ground zero for pretty much all life on Earth.
And inside the chloroplast, the structure is absolutely key. You've got the stroma, which is this dense fluid, kind of like the factory's workspace. And then you have these stacks of coin-like sacs called thylakoids. And right there, embedded in the membranes of those thylakoids, is the most important molecule of them all, chlorophyll. That's the green pigment that actually grabs the sunlight. So, scientists knew the basic ingredients for centuries, right? Water, CO2, and light. They make sugar and oxygen. But there is this huge mystery right at the heart of the equation, and it took a really brilliant insight to finally solve it.
Here was the puzzle. The inputs are CO2 and H2O, and one of the outputs is O2. See the problem? Both of the starting molecules have oxygen atoms in them. So which one is the source of the oxygen gas we all breathe? For a very long time, the best guess was actually wrong.
So the big breakthrough came in the 1930s from a scientist named C.B. Van Niel, and he was studying something totally different, bacteria that did photosynthesis without any water. He saw that these bacteria used hydrogen sulfide, that's H2S, and they produced pure sulfur as waste. And then he had this aha moment. What if plants were doing the same thing just with a different molecule? If bacteria split H2S to release sulfur, maybe, just maybe, plants were splitting H2O to release oxygen.
This was the key idea, his big hypothesis. Van Niel suggested that photosynthesis isn't really about the CO2, it's fundamentally about splitting a hydrogen source. For plants, that source is water. And when you split a water molecule, what do you have left over? Oxygen.
This was a completely revolutionary way of looking at it.
Now, it took almost 20 more years to prove he was right. Scientists got clever. They used a heavy version of oxygen, an isotope called oxygen-18, to act as a tracer. First, they gave plants water made with this heavy oxygen. And guess what? The oxygen gas that came out of the plant was heavy. Then, they did it the other way. They gave plants carbon dioxide with heavy oxygen. This time, the gas that came out was just normal, regular oxygen. And that was it. Case closed.
So here it is, the mystery solved. That beautiful experiment proved without a doubt that the oxygen atoms from the water molecules are the ones that get released as the O2 gas that we're all breathing. Meanwhile, the atoms from the carbon dioxide, those are what actually get used to build the sugar.
Okay, so now we know the inputs and the outputs. But how does the chloroplast factory actually do the work? Well, it's not just one single thing that happens. It's a beautifully coordinated two-stage assembly line.
So yeah, the process isn't just one simple step. It's more like a coordinated dance between two totally distinct stages. You've got the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. You can think of it as photo for the light reactions because they need light, and synthesis for the Calvin cycle because that's where the sugar is actually put together or synthesized.
All right, let's break down this assembly line. Stage 1 is the light reactions. This happens right in those thylakoids. It takes in sunlight and water, and its only job, its whole purpose, is to capture that solar energy and store it in two little energy-carrying molecules, kind of like rechargeable batteries, called ATP and NADPH. Oh, and this is also the step where oxygen gets released as waste. Then we move to stage 2, the Calvin cycle. This happens out in the stroma. It takes that chemical energy that stage 1 just made, grabs some CO2 from the air, and uses that power to finally build the sugar. And here's the most important takeaway. These two stages are completely dependent on each other. The Calvin cycle is powerless without the energy captured by the light reactions. It's a perfect partnership.
Okay, wow. We've gone way deep into the molecular level. So now let's zoom all the way back out and take a look at the big picture. What does this microscopic process really mean for all of us and for the entire planet?
I mean, why does any of this matter to you? Well, first, it makes the food you eat. It doesn't matter if you're eating a salad or a steak from a cow that ate grass, it all comes back to photosynthesis. Second, it releases the oxygen that you are literally breathing in right this second. Third, all the fossil fuels that power our civilization, they're just stores of ancient sunlight, captured by this exact process millions of years ago. And finally, it might just be our best hope for a sustainable energy future.
And this isn't some far-off science fiction. It's actually happening right now. What you're looking at here is called a photobioreactor. It's basically a high-tech farm for algae, and algae are these tiny little photosynthetic powerhouses. By growing them in these controlled environments, researchers can harvest the oils they produce and turn them into biodiesel, a truly sustainable fuel. Which really just leaves us with a final, fascinating thought. What if we could get really smart about harnessing this ancient, elegant process? I mean, we know that photosynthesis eats up CO2, so does it make sense to start building these algae farms right next to the places that pump out the most CO2, like factories or highways? It's a powerful question, you know, using nature's oldest and best solution to try and solve our most modern problems.